Anytime you create a new document, by default Microsoft has all the text that you type in, any text within the document, left align or left paragraph align. What that means is that when you start typing, you can see it's aligned perfectly over to the left-hand side. But when I get to the end of the line here, if it can't squeeze it, it'll wrap it. You can see it's not aligned perfectly, but it is on the left-hand side. And again, it's paragraph aligned. What do I mean by that? Well, let's come up here on the Home tab to the Paragraph group, click on the Show Hide Codes. And as you recall in an earlier training video, anytime that you hit the Enter key on the keyboard, it creates a paragraph marker, except the first one by default's there. So when I hit Enter here, everything to the left of this paragraph marker and above it is a paragraph. And well, there's nothing here, but it's still a paragraph. And you can see here everything to the left of it and above it's a paragraph until it hits the next paragraph marker, and that's its own paragraph there, and that's its own paragraph there, and so on. So if I go ahead and click anywhere within this paragraph here, and I want to say let's do a center align where it's not aligned to the left, it's not aligned to the right, it's aligned in the center, come up here on the Home tab to the Paragraph group, and there it is. Click on Center Align. So it doesn't align it perfectly over the left-hand side or the right-hand side, but it's equally spaced out, so each line is centered. And then you can also do Right Align, so it's aligned perfectly on the right-hand side, doesn't care about the left-hand side. And then they have what's called Justify, where it stretches everything else out, so some of the spacing in between some of the words here are either tinier or they're expanded, so it can align perfectly on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. It is justifiably aligned on both sides. One more thing I want to show you is that anywhere there's a blank line or no text within the paragraph, you see my I-beam there when I move my mouse? Now you'll notice that when I move it to the right a little bit, notice the right of that I-beam, you have a bunch of lines. It looks a lot like the lines that you see up here. So there you go, left align, and when I move it to the center, it goes to the bottom, and it's the lines that look like that button there. So center align, and then go to the right, and you see how it flips over to the left-hand side, so it looks like it's aligned perfectly on the right-hand side. Well, if you go ahead and you find which alignment that you want, like center or right, and you double-click really fast, boom, it automatically pops that cursor over to the right-hand side and changes it to right alignment. And you can verify that by coming up here in the Paragraph group and seeing that the right alignment button is highlighted. So when I start typing text, you can see that it's keeping it aligned perfectly to the right-hand side but pushing everything over to the left-hand side. And that only works where you get those lines on that little I-beam that you move around on those lines that are blank. So if I click down here on this paragraph, there's no text in there, and I move it, you can see left align, center align, and right align. So there are 3 different ways you can indent your paragraphs by using the paragraph markers. First of all, let me go ahead and click within a paragraph so I can demonstrate this to you. Well, is this a paragraph? Again, the way to find out is to come up here on the Home tab to the Paragraph group, click on the Show Hide Codes, and as we discussed in earlier training videos, when you see your paragraph markers, everything to the left of it and above it till it hits the next paragraph marker is a paragraph. So I've got my cursor flashing within this paragraph. Let me go ahead and turn off the codes. And if I want to indent the first line in the paragraph, come up here on the horizontal ruler, and if you don't see it, then you want to turn it on. You can come over here and click on the ruler button there. Click on it, it'll display the ruler. And you've got these 3 paragraph markers. You have what looks like a triangle pointing down. Below that you have a triangle pointing up, and you can hover over it and it tells you what kind of indent it is. And then you have a little square there. Okay, so you have the top one, which is a first line indent, next one hanging indent, and then the last one a left indent. First of all, the first line indent, when you click and drag that over to about right there, it moves the first line, indents it as far over as you drag that paragraph marker there up in the horizontal ruler. And then if you want to go ahead and apply that same indent to all the other paragraphs, instead of clicking in the next one and then clicking and dragging that top paragraph marker over, just go ahead and click within that paragraph. Click on the Format Paintbrush as we learned in an earlier training video, and then come down here and click within that paragraph, and it copies the formatting applied to this paragraph here and applies it to the next one. So if you want to keep doing that without having to click and then come up here, click it to select it and click in the next paragraph, just double click really fast, and then you can keep clicking and clicking and clicking. You see how my paintbrush is still up? You can keep clicking and format all the rest of the paragraphs within your document without having to go back and reselect that paintbrush. Let me go ahead and hit the escape key on the keyboard, and it takes me out of that. And then the other paragraph markers, let me go back and click in the first paragraph. And if I want it back to the way it was, then come up here and click and drag that paragraph marker all the way back so it's aligned perfectly with those other 2 down below. And then you can go ahead and click on the hanging indent. It's that second triangle pointing up. And I know it's really tiny, but if you can't do it freehand by clicking and dragging those little tiny markers, I'll show you how you can do it numerically in just a second. But let's go ahead and click and drag this one over. So what it does is it leaves the first line hanging and indents everything below that as far out as you want to drag that, okay? And go ahead and hit the undo key. The shortcut key for that hanging indent is Control-T, 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 and I'll keep doing it, okay? Undo, undo, undo. And then finally the last one, this one at the bottom here, is the left indent. That indents the entire paragraph. So click and drag that little rectangle over and indents everything. Undo it, or you can come over here in the paragraph group, come up here and click on the increase indent, and it'll do the same thing as if you were just clicking that last paragraph indent marker over. Let me go ahead and hit undo. Also, you have one over to the far right, which will do a right indent. Just click and drag that over and indents everything to the right hand side, so you can go ahead and do a left indent, a right indent, and it looks pretty cool like that, I suppose, if you need to apply that anywhere within your document, both left and right indents. Let me hit undo a couple of times. And then if you want to do it numerically without having to click and drag these tiny little markers here, then on the Home tab to the paragraph group, click on its expandable dialog box button. There's the indentation section. Come over here and change it from special to first line. You can see down the preview window how it indents everything over by about a ½ inch. You can go ahead and increase that. You can see it expands it over there. Or you can do a hanging indent, and then the first line is hanging, everything else gets indented. Click okie dokie and it pushes everything over. And of course you can either come back up here and expand the paragraph and change it back to none, or you can come over here and click and drag, if you can get those little paragraph markers all the way back so they're aligned perfectly so there's no indentation whatsoever. And then if you select none and you go ahead and you do a left indent, you can see down below it does a complete indent for all the lines within that paragraph. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel, come up here and click on that bottom left indent marker and drag it. And notice when I drag it, if I'm not dragging the right one, it moves everything. It moves this over, but it moves the first line out as well. So let me hit undo and make sure I grab the top one, the hanging indent, so it drags the text over and aligns it with the first line so nothing's hanging. Well, not the first line, that is. The default spacing in between your lines within a paragraph is single spacing, like I'm looking at this paragraph here. And how do I know this is a paragraph? Now again, we covered this in earlier training videos. Don't think of it as 2 or 3 sentences make up a paragraph as we learned in our English classes, but anytime we hit the Enter key, it creates a new paragraph, and that's how Microsoft Word sees it. So if I come up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group and click on my Show Hide Codes, anytime I see a paragraph marker, everything to the left and above it is a paragraph until it hits the next marker. That's a paragraph. Everything to the left of that's a paragraph. So when I click within this paragraph here, and I want to go ahead and change it from single spacing, the default, to double spacing, or to 1.5 spacing, come up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group, and then click on that button there, Line and Paragraph Spacing, and you can change that to double spacing. Click on that, and there we go. So everything within that paragraph is now double spaced in between the lines. So there's your line spacing. You can go ahead and click on the drop down arrow again and have more spacing options, and down below in the spacing section, come over here for line spacing and say that you want something even more so, maybe 4 or 4.15, and go ahead and click OK and really go crazy. Now the shortcut keys for your line spacing is Control-1, single space, Control-2, double space, Control-5, 1.5 spacing. Now if I turn off the codes here and you're looking at this, and let's say you sent me this document and I'm like, wow, I don't like the spacing in between those lines. If I could just click in between there and I can't seem to get my cursor there, I would delete that paragraph marker. I'm assuming it's a paragraph marker. Then I could collapse that line so it's stacked close together. I'm not going to know that until I come up here and click on my Show Hide Codes and go, hey, there's no paragraph marker there. It must be somebody changed the line spacing. So I can do Control-1, go back to single spacing, and I'm all good to go. Now next I want to cover is paragraph spacing, the spacing between one paragraph and another. And if I come down here and I delete that paragraph marker, these two paragraphs are just stacked right on top of each other, aren't they? But I can come over here and right-click anywhere within the first paragraph, or I can right-click anywhere within the second paragraph and go to the paragraph feature here. Down below in spacing, you have the spacing for before and after the paragraph. How much spacing do you want before this paragraph? And you can see down below in the preview window, it has that paragraph highlighted, So if I do before it, it pushes it down and opens up the spacing before the paragraph between that one and the one above it. So it's not stacked so close together. Click OK and boom, it's separated. Now it's split apart. And you'll notice that up here between this paragraph and that one, there's no paragraph marker. Now there's not one here either. So if I turn off my codes, you can imagine if I come down here and I go, if I could just go ahead and click in between these two paragraphs here and hit the delete key, I could collapse these together. I just can't do it. Oh, that's so annoying. Well, could it be that there's double spacing or triple spacing? No, because the lines are all close together, so it must be a paragraph spacing issue. So how do I go ahead and fix it? Well, you could right-click in the paragraph and go up to paragraph here and see if it's before or after. Or another way to find out about it is just go ahead and select the first line. And if the first line has it expanded, the highlighting, the selection of it, way up to the next line, then there's all that paragraph spacing between this paragraph and the one below it, but it's being applied to this paragraph because it extends up above. As opposed to, well, if I come down here and click and drag, do you see it expanding down below? No, but when I click and drag below here into the third paragraph, it expands up above. So the paragraph spacing is being applied to the paragraph that has the selection of the first line or last line of the paragraph extend beyond it, okay? So that way I know in this paragraph right here, if I just right-click in a blank area and go to paragraph, it's going to be the spacing before it. Zero it out, click OK, then I click and drag here. I know it's, again, before this paragraph, so right-click to paragraph, and then zero it out, click OK. And then if I want the spacing in between the two, but I don't want to use the paragraph spacing, I just rather create a new paragraph, hit the Enter key, come down here, hit the Enter key, click on your Show Hide Codes. You can see that we've got new paragraphs here separating this paragraph above from the one down below, and also this one from this one. And then the shortcut keys for paragraph spacing is Control-0, and what that does is it creates 12 points before the paragraph. So you can see I've got a paragraph marker here plus additional 12-point spacing, paragraph space. So if I click and drag that line, again the shortcut key Control-0 adds 12 points before the paragraph, whatever paragraph that I have my cursor flashing in. Of course I can right click, go to paragraph and get rid of that and click OK and I'm, well, back to where I started. If you need to create a list of items within your document here, one that's prioritized or ordered numerically, like 1 being the most important, number 2, 3, 4, like a grocery list, or better yet, let's do a camping list. Type in the title, hit enter, and instead of typing in 1 and then my item, and then hitting enter, number 2, don't type it in, go ahead and use the numbering feature within Microsoft Word by coming up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group, and there it is. Click on the numbering and it does two things. It adds the first number, number 1, and then it indents it. So we can type in the most important thing, number 1, when it comes to camping that we want to bring, which is toilet paper. All right. Number 2, next most important is some shelter. And you'll notice that any time that I type in an item and I hit enter, it goes to the next number sequentially here. So if I get to a point where I'm like, I don't need anything more than just the first 3, and I've got the extra number there, you can get rid of it one of a few ways. You can either hit the backspace key, but if you do that, it just gets rid of the number. It doesn't take your left indent and move it all the way to the left-hand side. You can see that my cursor is still flashing, lined up with all these other items within the list. So you'll need to hit the backspace key a couple of times till it gets all the way back to the left margin, or hit undo a couple of times. You can click on that bottom little teeny tiny left indent rectangle there and click and drag it over. That works, or hit undo a couple of times. Better yet, with the cursor flashing on the numbered item that I want to get rid of, come up here and just deselect the numbering feature. Not only does it get rid of the number, but you don't have to deal with the left indent. It just automatically pulls it over to the left-hand side. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And let's say that we want to add another list, an additional list. And this could be on the next page, or it just happens to be right below it. And let's say for this additional list, let me come back up here and click on the numbering feature, is other things that we want to bring when we're camping. Not as important as the original one here, but just additional items. If we can bring them, great. Actually, a pillow would be mandatory. In any case, hit enter. And now, after I get to a point where I'm like, you know what, this list is actually a continuation of the list above, and if I go ahead and continue the numbering, like this would be 4, 5, and 6, it wouldn't break up the order here, being 1 the most important, and then 3, and then number 4 is not greater than 3, so why don't we just go ahead and continue the numbering from the previous list? You can do that by, clicking up here in the first number here and just right-clicking and say that you want to continue from an earlier list. Well, you can imagine that if you had hundreds of lists within your document, that this one, just doesn't go out and choose any list. It chooses the one that's right above it. If it's right above it, as you see here, or if it's above it on an earlier page, it goes and looks at that page, the next adjacent list, which happens to be this one. So right click, want to continue from the one up above, so it continues on to 3, 4, 5, 6. By the same token, if you don't want to continue it, just right click and say you want to restart at 1. Now once you have them numbered, you don't have to stay with it numbered. You can go ahead and just, with your cursor flashing in the list here, come up here in the paragraph group and click on its adjacent drop down arrow, and you can see you can customize the numbers, make them different colors, underline them, or use these other default formats here, uppercase, lowercase, Roman numerals. And if you want to go ahead and customize your own, come down here where it says define new number format, click on it, and you can change the number style or leave it as is. Click on the font, and that's where you can get your color, something, fancy pastel color. Maybe you want to underline it, double underline, give it color for the double underline, maybe something blue there. You can see it down the preview window. Make it bold, and then click okie dokie again, and that's horrifying. Let's go ahead and undo that. Okay, but you get the idea. And then finally, let me go ahead and click on the number 2 item here. You can right click and also go to the numbering here. It's just like going up there and clicking on its corresponding drop down arrow in the paragraph group, and come down here and you can set the numbering value. Click on that. So instead of going from 1 to 2, you can say go from 1 to 3, and then it picks up 3, 4. So people will go, hey, what happened to number 2? Well, whatever your purpose is, you can go ahead and do it here and skip a few numbers and continue on. I'm going to go ahead and hit undo. Now, aside from the numbering feature, you have what's called the bullet or the bulleted list. So if I go ahead and click in this list up here and I click on the bullets, it converts it from a numerical list 1, 2, 3 to a bullet. Bullet means basically that nothing's really of a high priority. They're all important, so be sure to bring all of them, okay? And then in addition to the bullets, you have other options. You can click on its corresponding drop-down arrow and choose from other characters here, or go ahead and define a new bullet by either, again, changing the font, the color. If you want to go ahead and choose different colors, underline it, that's fine. You can choose symbols, maybe a trademark symbol for your bullets, TM, TM, TM. I'm going to click cancel, or find a picture. You can go ahead and import a picture if you've got one out there on your computer, or select from one of these here. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down, and that one's okay. Click okie dokie, and that's not too bad. You can also right click and go down to bullets and get the same options as you do up above. Let me go ahead and click undo. And then finally, so we've covered the numbering feature, the bulleted feature, you have the multi-level list feature. That when you click on the drop down arrow, you can go ahead and choose and create a multi-leveled list. What that means is when you click on it, in that sample, you saw that it starts off with the numbers here, but if you go to another number and hit the tab key, you see the hierarchical structure beginning to take place in this multi-level list. So you have the first priority, number 1, toilet paper, and then still a part of the toilet paper is a tent because, you want your privacy if you can. You don't want to just, in any case, I digress. Or better yet, to make more sense of this, not any kind of toilet paper, but soft. So there, that supports it. So not just toilet paper, but the supporting part of it, it's got to be soft. If you ever need to draw a line in between 2 paragraphs, these 2 right here, because let's say the one up above is an entirely different thought than the one down below, so you want to border it off, draw a line in between the 2 because it doesn't transition. Well, go ahead and click in between the 2 paragraphs. You could go ahead and hold down the shift key and hit the underscore key several times, but that's going to take too long. Let's go ahead and hit undo. Instead, you can use the border feature. And to do that, come up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group. Let me turn on the Show Hide Codes first because the border feature works in conjunction with these paragraph codes. So wherever there's a paragraph, you can add a border either above the paragraph or below it, to the right, to the left. Come back up here and there's the border feature. Click on the corresponding drop-down arrow and you can see that you can place a border at the bottom of the paragraph, above it, to the left, to the right. Let's do the bottom. You can see there we go. It's at the bottom of the paragraph. Let me go ahead and turn off the codes here so we can see what it looks like. And well, if I want it above, so the line's right below this paragraph, then I can do it one of 2 ways. I can either stay within this paragraph, come back up here, click on the drop-down arrow and say, okay, place the border on top, in which case I still have the bottom border, so I may want to click on the drop-down arrow and say no borders and then try that again. Click on the drop-down arrow and say top, or let me click on the drop-down arrow and say no border and come up here and click in the paragraph above it and say that I want a border right below that, okay? So you can see how you can work with that, either the paragraph below or the one above it, to get your line in between the two paragraphs. Visibly speaking, in between these two paragraphs, invisible, or when I turn on the codes, in between these two paragraph markers here. Okay, let me go ahead and turn those off. Now if I didn't know any better and I opened up the document and I'm like, I don't like that line there, let me delete it. There may be times you're able to delete those lines, those borders, but if you can't, then again you want to come up here and click on the corresponding drop down arrow and say no border. But if I didn't know that this border was being applied to the paragraph up above and I assumed it's the one below, when I click in that paragraph and click on the drop down arrow and say no border and it doesn't remove it, then you'll know that it's the one above. Go ahead and click anywhere in that paragraph above and click on the drop down arrow and say no border and it removes it. Don't forget that when you click on the drop down arrow, you also have other options like the left border, click on the drop down arrow, the right border. In any case, to get rid of those, again, no border. You also have the option of doing some customizations by coming down here and clicking on borders and shading. Now make sure that your cursor is flashing the paragraph that you want to apply this to. So let's go down to the second paragraph here and then click on the drop down arrow and go down to borders and shading. First of all, we're on the borders tab and you can go ahead and by default it doesn't have a border around the paragraph, and you can see that when we do select a border it's going to be applied to the entire paragraph, or the paragraph marker, everything to the left and above it. So if I go ahead and click on the box, you can see over in the preview window it adds it and draws a box around the entire paragraph. And then you can go ahead and select a color like maybe red and change the width to maybe a half, makes it thinner. And then maybe we want some shading. So come over here, click on the shading tab and say you want a fill color. There's the preview window, so we have a red border around the paragraph, and say we want something lighter shade there. And again, it's still being applied to the paragraph, so when I click OK, there you go. Ooh, that's pretty fancy. And then if I want to go ahead and customize that because I don't like it, and again, thinking that if you didn't see this training video and you're going, how do I get rid of the border around this paragraph, or how do I delete the color within it? I mean, that's kind of crazy. Just go ahead and click within the paragraph here, and now because you watched the training video, you know where to go. Come back up here to the paragraph group, and there's the border and shading button because it remembers the last place that we were at. So instead of clicking on the drop down arrow and coming down here, and you see the icon there, let me click off in blank area, just click on it right here and it pulls up the same window. So if you need to make some changes, you can go crazy on this. You can come over here in the preview window and click on the border to remove it, and then go ahead and let's say that we want a thicker border, maybe 3-point, and let's change the color to, let's say, blue, and then click on the left border. I mean, like I said, you can go crazy. You can have a different color for this border, different thickness, and that border, that border. I mean, just go ahead and click to remove or click to add, and click to change the color and the width of it, and even the style here. And let me click above. I mean, ooh, that's kind of kooky. And then you got some additional options here, like if I click on the options button, you're looking in the preview window and it says, well, from the top of the border, where do you want your text? And then it says from the text, do you want from the top of the border? You can go ahead and do 8 points. And notice how the text is separated from the border by about 9 points. Click OK, and there you go. You got some space in between the top border. You've got these kooky borders, blue on both sides, a dashed line up at the top, red one down below in any case. And then like I said, to get rid of it, click on the corresponding drop down arrow, say you want no border. There's your highlighting that's still there, but you can click on the drop down arrow and say you want to go to borders and shading. Go to the shading tab and say that you want no color. Click okie dokie, and we're back to where we started. Looking at my document here, you can see I've got the title of it, and then down below I've got my headings for each of these paragraphs, like step 1, step 2. And usually when you want to offset a heading to a paragraph, you'd go ahead and select it and place some sort of emphasis on it. Like when I hover over here and I go up and right diagonally to get my mini formatting toolbar up, I can make it bold, italics, or of course you can come up here to the font group, underline it. I mean, that's all fine, but if you want to use some of Word's more advanced features later on, like creating a table of contents, and you want to be able to pull these headings here into your table of contents, Microsoft Word's going to ignore it because it doesn't understand this. What it does understand are what are called header styles. For example, let me go ahead and hit undo to get rid of all those formats that I applied to that heading there. And go ahead and click anywhere within that paragraph, because that is a paragraph. It's separated from this one, as you recall in an earlier training video. Boy, I'm really pounding this into your head, aren't I? Come up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group, click on the Show Hide Codes, and you can see that little paragraph marker right there. That means that everything to the left of it and above it is a paragraph until you hit the next marker. So if I click anywhere within that paragraph here, and I come up here on the Home tab to the Styles group, use one of these heading styles here when you want to go ahead and apply a format to your headings here. And the reason why you want to use these is because Microsoft Word will recognize these heading styles here, and when it comes to later on creating a table of contents, it'll look for all these heading styles and plop them right in your table of contents. If you don't know what a table of contents is, then you want to watch my training video on that, but right now I want you to get used to, when it comes to formatting your headings here, to use the styles. Don't do it on your own unless you're sure you don't want to use Word's advanced features, which you probably don't know about until you watch the rest of the training videos in level 1, 2, and 3. In any case, come up here, click on the More button to see all the different styles. You have heading 1, and notice when I hover over it, you get a preview down below. Just go ahead and look at that, step 1 spiritually, how it pops open and it's blue, and you're like, oh yeah, that's fine and dandy. I can use the heading 1 style and click on it. But what if I don't like the color here or the size of it? That's okay. You can go ahead, come back up here to the heading 1 style, right click on it and see you want to modify it. When you modify it, you get the chance to change the formatting. Instead of using the font Cambria or the size 14 or B for bold or even the color, maybe go to automatic and maybe change this to type in times. There it is. After I type in the first couple letters, it pulls it up here. Just hit the tab key and it'll pop it open. And let's do, well, size 16. And you see how I'm modifying that heading style, heading 1 here. Click OK, and it updates it to something that I like, just with a simple right click. So that way I can hit 2 birds with 1 stone. I get to be able to use the styles here to pull into the table of contents for some of the more advanced features later in Word. And at the same time, I'm able to customize the default heading style to something that looks nice to me. And then I can scroll down to the next paragraph here, click in it, and then go ahead and come up here and click on heading 1, scroll down to the next one, click in it, hit the F4 key because as you recall, the F4 will repeat the last formatting action, and the last formatting action was applying the heading 1 style to the one up above it, okay? Now a couple more things. Let me go ahead and scroll back up to the top and turn off my show hide codes here so they don't annoy you and me. If I come in here into the heading and I select the heading here and I say, well, instead of 16 I want it at 14, and I'm like, you know what, this is the good style, and maybe make it italics. When I scroll down, does it update all the rest? No. But if I would like it to update all the other headings, and go ahead and click within that style here, come back up here and right click on heading 1 and say that you want to go ahead and update this heading 1 to match the selections. So when you left click on it, it says that heading 1 is now going to be what I have selected here, which the cursor was flashing within it. And you can see down below it took that and updated all the other paragraphs here that had the heading 1 style applied to it, the original one, where it wasn't italicized or had a smaller font, size 14. And then finally, if I go ahead and I right click on this and go back down to modify, keep in mind that this will only apply in this document unless you click and select the new documents based upon this template. And then anytime, of course, you create a new document, you'll always be defaulted with the heading style here, the one that you set up that you can see behind the window here, instead of the default, which is blue and in Cambria and I think size 14. Another benefit for actually using these styles here is that when you hit Control F to do a find, to look over here in the navigation pane, remember the 3 different tabs? This is the one for browsing the results from the current search. This one's for the pages in your document, shows you the 2 pages, and then this one is for the headings. Now because I actually used the styles here, it pinpointed the headings and it marked them off here, spiritually, physically, and mentally. Pretty cool, because I can just click and go right to it. Wow, that's neat. So you can see a definite benefit by using the styles, at least here when it comes to finding things within your document by using the navigation pane, as opposed to other things that we're going to learn later on, like the table of contents, that we'll be able to quickly spot these styles and then pull them into the table of contents. Then one final note, if you're looking for more heading styles, instead of just heading 1, you want heading 2, 3, 4, and so on. Typically, heading 1 is the largest heading style, so when you're looking on a newspaper, it's the one up at the top that leads, and then heading 2, more like subheadings, heading 3, and so on. In any case, if you want to show more than just what you see here when you click on the More button, because all I've got here is heading 1, go ahead and click its expandable dialog box button for the Styles group, and then come down here and click on the Manage Styles button. And then if it doesn't take you to the Recommend tab, you might be on the Edit tab, go ahead and go to the Recommend tab. You can see that headings 2 through 9 are all hidden until used. Instead, let's go ahead and show them by selecting them, coming down here and click on Show. And you can select heading 3, click Show, or you can go back and select heading 2, 1, and say Hide Until Used. In any case, I've shown the other two headings, 2 and 3, click Okie dokie, and then go ahead and close out of here, and you can see up in the Styles group, there's heading 1, heading 2, click the More button, and there's heading 3. And you can go ahead and hover over it, and you can see there's step 2, my cursor's flashing the paragraph. Let's go instead down to step 3, and then go over heading 2, and then click on More, and then go over to heading 3. Pretty much the same. You can go ahead and right click and of course modify that and make whatever changes you want that best fits what your heading 3 should be. When it comes to finding out what formatting is being applied to the text, clicking within the text and coming up here and looking in the font group and saying, okay, well, that font type is Cambria, size 26, what color is it? Click on the drop down arrow. In any case, you've got quite a few places you need to go. Another place you can go is to the Styles group, and you can see that the style title is being applied to it. Well, what type of formatting does the style have? Let me go ahead and right click on it, go to Modify, and you can see it's here, Cambria, size 26. Well, that color, click on the drop down arrow, hover over it, and it says it's dark blue, text 2, darker 25%. Cool. And then you can click on the Format button, come up and go to Paragraph to see how much spacing after that style there's going to be, or after that paragraph that the style is being applied to is going to be 15. Let me click Cancel, click Cancel. I mean, those are a couple of ways, or better yet, you can click on its expandable dialog box button for styles, click on it. It opens up and it shows you the style, again, not the formatting, but if you come down below, you see these buttons, you've got New Style, Style Inspector, and Manage Styles. Let's go to Style Inspector, pulls that up, because on Style Inspector, you got a couple of options. You got the paragraph formatting that you can go ahead and reset to normal paragraph style, or come back down here and you've got Reveal Formatting and New Style. Let's go to Reveal the Formatting. Well, we got 3 task panes that are up. Style Inspector, let me close out of that. We had styles that we first opened up before we got to Style Inspector, let me close that, and then finally Reveal Formatting. So when I click in here, and the cursor's flashing within that text, it shows me up here the selected text and down below the font that's being applied to it, all the formatting. So size 26, font color, text 2, the paragraph style is title, alignment is left, so you get a lot of details here about what's going on and what's being applied as far as formatting goes to the text that you have your cursor flashing within or within that paragraph. So I can come down here and click within that paragraph that the formatting is being applied to, and you can look over here and you can see that the selected text is spiritually, and you can see the font, it's size 14, it's bold, the color, I mean, there's your revealed formatting here. Now if you want to go ahead and clear the formatting being applied to that selected text, come up here, hover over the box there, click on the corresponding drop down arrow and say you want to clear the formatting. It gets rid of it, you're good to go. So you don't have to select it here and then come up here and unselect B for bold, or click on the drop down arrow and type in Times New Roman and click on the drop down arrow here and change it back to 12. When you clear the formatting here, it's all gone. So it may take a few clicks to get here. 1, to expand the styles group, 2, to click on Style Inspector, and then from Style Inspector to open up Reveal Formatting. But you can imagine if you have a lot of formatting being applied to something that you either want to find out more about it, it's a lot easier than clicking behind the scenes for the paragraph to find out how much of a paragraph spacing, what other formats are being applied to it, than looking over here in the Reveal Formatting task pane, and also simply clearing any format that's being applied to it. I'm going to go ahead and undo that and then close out of the Reveal Formatting, and we're back to where we started. If you haven't watched a training video on finding and replacing text, I recommend that you watch it, because here, assuming that you've seen it, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I mean, there's some similarities, but what we're going to be doing here is finding and replacing the formatting that's been applied to the text. For example, when I scroll down through the document, and you can see my read mores have bold. What if I want to replace the read mores with the formatting bold applied to it to, let's say, italics? Instead of selecting each one and then moving up and to the right diagonally to bring up the mini formatting toolbar, to deselect the B for bold and click I for italics and doing that for each one. I mean, that can be annoying if I have 100 of these. So instead, let me go ahead and hit the undo a couple of times, and let's go ahead and use the find and replace feature. I'm going to go ahead and hit the Control Home keys to take me to the beginning of my document. And then to bring up the find and replace window, go ahead and hold down the Control key and hit the letter H. It brings up find and replace, places us on the replace tab, and it says, what do you want to find? I don't want to find any text, so I'm not going to type in anything. I want to find some formatting, so we're going to go ahead and click the More button, come down here, click on the Format button, and go up and select Font. And then we're going to come up here and select Bold because that's the format that we want to find. Click Okie dokie, and there it is. It's going to find the format Bold. It's going to find any text throughout the whole document that has bold applied to it, including my Read Mores. What do we want to replace it with? Go ahead and click in that box, then come back down here, click on the Format button. I mean, you can replace it with highlight, style, frame, language, tabs, but we're going to keep it simple and go back to font. And say we want to replace it with italic. And how about some fancy color? Ooh, red. Go ahead and select that. You can see in the preview window, click Okie dokie. And then let's go ahead and take it for a test drive. Let me click Less, and then click and drag the title bar up so we can see more of our document. Click Find Next. And what's interesting is that, well, I didn't know that bold was applied to this, but it makes sense now because it looks bold, doesn't it? So the heading 1 style has bold in it. I don't want to replace that, so we'll click Find Next until we get to Read More. Then click Replace. And then, of course, it goes to the next step 2, the heading 1 style applied to it, the bold. Let's click Find Next. And notice how it goes to Read, and then I click Replace, and then it goes to More, and then I click Replace. The reason why is because Read has bold applied to it, and More, but not the space in between. Let me prove it to you. Are we done? Do you understand what we're doing here? Just Find Next, and click Replace, Find Next, click Replace. But actually, if you feel daring, and you're sure that everything that you have within your document has the bold applied to Read More only, then click Replace All and replace all the bolds. That is, if you don't have anything else in bold. In any case, we're going to go ahead and click Close, and let's scroll back up to the top here, and let's go ahead and on the Home tab in the paragraph group, click on our Show Hide Codes button, and let's take a look. So when I select this text here, you can see that bold's been applied to it. Select More, bold's been applied to it. But when I click and drag and select the dot in between, the space, bold hasn't been applied to it. So that's why it didn't stop there. It went from one word to the next and didn't select the entire line there. Now if I want to do another search, let's say for some text or other formatting, of course go ahead and hit Control H to bring up the window, and you can see that the format's still applied. So let's click on More. With the cursor flashing in the first one, let's go down and click on No Formatting so we can clear it out, because if I type in some text like well-being, with bold still applied to it, you can see well-being there. Bold's not applied to it, but if I have the format plus the text, it's looking for the text with the format applied to it in bold. So I'll get 0 results, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? So you want to pay attention down below to make sure if you're just searching for text, you're not also searching for format, unless of course that's what you meant to do. Let's go ahead and click in the Replace With, select No Formatting, and if I don't do any searches but I click Cancel, when I do Control H again, it's still going to bring it back up. So format will always be there, my bold and italics and red for replacement, until I do one of two things. Either close out of the word program altogether, so it'll reset this, or I actually do another search after I clear it out. So I say no formatting, come up here, say no formatting, and then I search for, I don't know, let's try life. And go ahead and click Find Next. It finds it, click Cancel, go ahead and do Control H to bring it back up. Is the formatting there? No, but the last search feature was for the word life. So it remembers the most recent search. A table is basically a box that has a bunch of other boxes within it, what are known as cells. Typically you could have a square and have 4 other boxes or cells within that square. All those 4 cells within the box make up a table. You can have more cells within the box or less. In any case, what I want to do here is I want to insert a table and keep track of the number of houses sold by the senior sales associate. And what this table does is it's used to organize text, data, or pictures. So once I have those cells in one cell, I can say, okay, this cell, or in this column of cells, I'm going to have the name of all my sales associates. In the next adjacent cells, in that column, maybe the month of January, their sales, and then February, March, and so on. So to insert a table, I don't want to insert it right before the line here. I want to insert it after the line. So let me come up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group, click on the Show Hide Codes. You can see my paragraphs. Let me click on the last one here, and then I'll turn it off. And then come back up here, click on the Insert tab, go to the Tables group, and there it is. Click on the Table drop-down arrow, and you can see all the cells there. So you can have a 1-by-1 table, and you can see down in the document where it's just one cell, a 1-by-1. That one cell is also a table. Or you can go down and have a 1-by-2. So you got 2 cells that make up a table, or you can go over to the right and have a 2-by-2 table. In other words, a total of 4 cells within the table. To get started, I'm going to go ahead and do a 4-by-1. So once I hover over and I go to the 4th box over, so I have 1 row but with 4 cells, go ahead and click on it, and it adds your table with 4 cells. And then because we're dealing with the table, that we have it selected or we have the cursor flashing within it, it brings up its related contextual tabs for the design and the layout of the table tools. Of course, when we click out of the table, those related contextual tabs disappear. Go ahead and click back within and it brings it back up. So in the first cell, to organize my sales associates by month or the first quarter, so the first cell I'm going to go ahead and type in the title, associates, and then when I want to go to the next cell, I can either go ahead and click over in it, but instead of lifting your hands off the keyboards to move the mouse, just go ahead and hit the tab key and it moves right on over. And then we'll type in the month Jan for January, hit the tab key, FEB for February, hit the tab key, and if I made a mistake and I want to go back and actually correct February, maybe I misspelled it or something, you can use the mouse to go back, or better yet, if you hold down the Shift key and hit the tab key, it goes backwards. So hit the tab key to go forward in your table, or Shift tab to go backwards. That way, again, you don't have to lift your hands off the keyboard to move the mouse to go back and forth between those cells. So when I hit the tab key, we'll also do March. And if I made a mistake and I'm like, oh, fudge, I meant to add another row because the first row is about the titles, and I want another row down below with the same number of columns or cells, so I can start typing in under the label here, associates, the first one. All you have to do is go ahead and go to the last cell in your table, hit the tab key, and automatically, boom, it opens up the next row of the same number of cells. And then I can go ahead and type in my sales associate, tab over, type in some numbers of sales that he's made for the month of January for 56, 44, 22. Well, you get the idea. And you can just go ahead and keep tabbing to add more and more rows of cells. Of course, another way to navigate around your cells, besides using the tab or the mouse, you can also use the arrow keys on the keyboard to go within a cell over letter by letter or down from the cell above to the one below. Now that you know how to create a table, as we learned in the previous training video, this is the table that I created, I want to show you how you can modify it. For example, as you recall, when we want to advance from one cell to the next, one of the ways is to hit the tab key. But what if I want to tab within the cell and not advance to the next cell? As you recall in an earlier training video, let me go ahead and click outside of the table so it can take me to the Home tab. Let me go to the paragraph group and click on Show Hide Codes so I can show my codes. When I hit the tab key, the symbol for the tab is the arrow, and it bumps it over about a ½ inch. But when I click within the cell, by the way, you see those circles within the cells? That's the code for that being a cell, which isn't obvious by the 4 borders there. In any case, there's the code. Hold down the Control key and then hit the tab key and it will tab within the cell. And you can see the symbol for that, the arrow, and then there's the arrow as well. I'm going to go ahead and hit undo a couple of times to get rid of those tabs and then turn off the codes so it doesn't annoy me while I work on other things within the table. Next, if I want to go ahead and let's say switch some columns around, like let's move February over in front of January. It's really simple. Just go ahead and hover over the top border of that column, well, until your I-beam changes to a black arrow pointing down. Then go ahead and click so you can select the entire column, and then you want to cut it. Go ahead and do the shortcut keys Control X, cuts it, and then go ahead and click within the cell of the column that you want to paste it in front of, and then you can go ahead and use the shortcut keys Control V as in Victor to paste it, okay? Or, let me hit the undo button. The other way you can do it, of course, is to go ahead and right-click, and then you get the pasting options. You can paste it as a new column, same thing, or you can paste it as a nested table, or you can insert as new rows, or keep text only. In any case, I'm going to go ahead and click off in a blank area, and just go ahead and do Control V as in Victor to do a normal paste there. So you can go ahead and switch your columns about. Now looking at the width of each cell, we got a lot of dead white space that I don't have to have. I can go ahead and collapse it. That way if I shrink the table enough, it doesn't have to stretch all the way from the left margin to the right margin. So to go ahead and collapse it, I can do it one of two ways. I can either hover over the line in between the 2 columns till you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions and click and drag in, or of course click and drag out, but we want to, drag in. Or when you're hovering over it, just double click really fast. When you do that, it does what's called an auto fit. It'll go ahead and fit that column to the longest text within that column, which both of these have the same length. It did a best fit to both. Another way you can do it is just right click within the cell and then go down to auto fit and go ahead and select auto fit to contents. When you do that, it does the entire table. So you don't have to go ahead and double click on each line between each column to do a best fit. Just do that once and it does the entire table. Now that we have our table shrunken down, as it were, if I want to go ahead and move it, notice that, let me click outside the table. that when I click within the table and I'm hovering over it with my mouse, that you get this little tag in the upper left-hand corner that when I click outside of it, give it a second, when you're not hovering over it, disappears. When I hover back over it, even though my cursor's outside of it, it brings up that tag. That tag is how you can move the table about. Go ahead and click on it and drag that tag. You know, anybody who grabs you by the ear, you're going to move with them, right? So you can say that that's the ear of the table here. You can click and drag and move about. Now, if you're at a loss for creating a table, maybe one that's set up with some color formatting, you know, a certain style, Microsoft Word actually has a few you can check out. Come up here, click on the Insert tab, go to the Tables group, click on the Tables drop-down arrow, go down to Quick Tables, and there's some quick tables. You've got Calendar 1, one style, Calendar 2, a different style. You can go ahead and scroll down and find the one that you want, hover over it, like the tabular list. Simple tabular list using the light list accent 3 table style. Ooh, sounds fancy. Click on it and it adds it. Of course, it's got some generic text. You can go ahead and replace that easy enough just by double-clicking on the column label for the column and replacing it with associates. Going to the next one, double-click, typing over that, calling it your, the first month of the quarter, January, and then right-clicking, going to insert. Let's insert a column to the right. Call it, well, it's really tiny. Come up here and type in Feb for February, and of course if you want to stretch that open, hover over the right border of it until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, then click and drag to stretch that open just a bit more, and then you can hover over. You can't really see it. If you can't see the lines there because there are no lines there, but you don't want to add lines to it, come up here on the Layout tab and come over here to the Table group and click on View Grid Lines. That way you can see the lines of the grid without actually adding lines to it. So then you can hover over here and click and drag and stretch that open. And then when you're done, just go ahead and click on it to remove it. And okay, let's go back to the Design tab. And we've got some table styles. Whether it's the quick style or you create a table from scratch, just a simple black and white, go to the Design tab. In the Table Styles group, click on More. And the current style that's applied to it is green. Just go ahead and hover over it to get the name of it. Light List Accent 3. That sounds so cool. Okay, let's go and do something purplish. Let's do something more medium shadow 1, accent 4. Click on it. Looks fabulous. Other table style options that you have, back up here on the Design tab to the Table Style Options group, is a total row. What that does is that if your last row, let me hit the Tab key a couple of times so I can go ahead and type in total. Let me hit the Tab key and you go ahead and you sum up the numbers here and you type it down below, and I think it's 14. And you check this box up here. What it does is it offsets it and says, okay, this is actually a total row. It's not part of the items up above. You can tell that by the name, but hey, what better way to grab your attention than to make the last row bold and to offset it by checking the box that the last row is the total row. We can go ahead and choose banded rows, which means that every other row has the same color. So these rows are in light purple, the other rows are white. Think of it like the tab training video where we learned how to use the tab stops and add tab leaders that leads our eye from one column to the next. Well, instead of little dots or dashes or lines, you have color. So this color goes from over here to over there. It leads the eye. You don't go, let's see, pens, we've got 2. In any case, that color will help lead your eye. So you have banded rows. Let's go ahead and uncheck that. You also have banded columns. So, every other column has the same color. This is purple. Third one's purple. Fifth one's purple, and then of course in between will be white. Go ahead and uncheck that. Let me delete the last column. Right click, go ahead and delete cells and say we want to delete the entire column, because when I check this last column, it pulls focus on the text or the contents within that last column. That's why I wanted to delete the last column, because there's nothing within it to pull focus to or to make it bold. Or you can go ahead and pull focus to the first column and uncheck the last column. If you want to be able to take the text within a table that you no longer have use for, you just want the information therein, whatever you do, you don't want to come in here and double click to select the text and cut it, or click and drag it and move it outside the table. I mean, if you have one cell, that's fine, but we've got a lot of cells here, and so that's going to take a long time. Let me go ahead and hit the undo button, and instead just go ahead and click anywhere within the table and come up here in its related contextual layout tab, click on that, go to the data group, and click on Convert to Text. When you click on it, it says, okay, when we extract the data out of the table, how do you want to keep it separated? Do you want to do it by commas, so it's books, comma 1, magazines, comma 3, or do you want to do it by tabs, so we got some spacing in between our first column and our second column, about a tab length here. I'm going to go ahead and choose tabs and click OK, and There you go. Go ahead and come up here on the Home tab to the Paragraph group, click on the Show Hide Codes. You can see all the tab symbols, and notice what kind of tab it's using. If you come up here on the horizontal ruler, the tab stop, when you hover over it, it's a left aligned tab. So once it comes over here, it stops. That's a tab stop, and then after, it does the left alignment. So if there's any more text, it moves it to the right, but it keeps everything here on this stop aligned perfectly left align. And by the same token, if you've got a couple of columns here that either has the delimiter a tab or a comma, item, comma, needed, books, comma, 1, or a space or a dash, and you want to convert that into a table, go ahead and click and drag and select everything there, and then come up here on the Insert tab, go to the Tables group, click on the Table drop-down arrow, and say you want to convert the text here to a table. When you click on it, it brings up a window and it says, okay, from what I can tell, you've got tabs that are separating the text. If not, and we made a mistake, then you've got these other options. If it's a paragraph, or if it's commas, item, comma, needed, books, comma, 1, then go ahead and choose that for some other character. And then it says, from what I can tell here, the number of columns that we'll convert this into is 2. Because of the tabs that are present, from what you have selected, we only have 1, so we've got the left-hand side, the right-hand side, hence 2 columns. Click Okie dokie, and let me go ahead and click within a cell and turn off these codes. Go to the Home tab and deselect the Show Hide Codes, and then of course hover over the right-hand border of the table till I can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, then do a double click so it does a best fit and it collapses it so I don't have all that white space over there annoying me. There's a couple ways you can insert your symbols and special characters into your document. One way is really simple. All you have to do is just start typing. For example, if I want to type in the copyright symbol in front of Dreamforce LLC, let me go ahead and hit the space bar and then hit the left arrow key so I can go back. So I've got some space in between that copyright symbol and the Dreamforce LLC text. And then to insert the symbol, just open parentheses, lowercase c, close parentheses, and automatically it does an autocorrect feature. And we went over that feature lightly in an earlier training video. But what it does is that when you type something in and then you hit the space bar, it looks back at it and it says, okay, what can I do to fix this? In this case, it said, okay, the C was in parentheses, let's go ahead and convert it into a symbol. And the autocorrect features, you can access that by either hovering over what just got converted, and you get that blue little rectangle down below. Hover over that, you get the smart tag, you get the options for autocorrect. You can click on its drop-down arrow, change it back, stop automatically doing this, or bring up the control autocorrect options. When you click on it, it brings up the window. That's one way. And you can see it'll replace, in this column, anything that's been typed with what's over in this column. Let me click cancel, because another way to bring up the autocorrect options, if you don't have that little blue rectangle there and you want to make some changes without having to type something in, then come up here, click on the File tab, go to the Options tab, then come up here, click on the Proofing tab, and there it is, autocorrect options. Click on it, brings up the same window. Okay, we'll work with this a little bit later on. More specifically on the autocorrect options, click cancel. Let me click at the end, hit the space bar, and then the other way that you can go ahead and enter in your symbols or special characters is, of course, to insert it. Come up here, click on the Insert tab, go over to the Symbols group, click on the symbol drop-down arrow, the least of which is our copyright sign. You can select from others, and ooh, there's a happy face. It's happy to see you. Or you can do more symbols, and this is where you get your special characters, other symbols. I'll select 7/8, and then click on Insert, or you can go ahead and double-click on it, and it'll insert. Let me click and drag the title bar out of the way so you can see when I click the Insert button or double-click on it, it adds it either way. You can also click on the drop-down arrow for font and scroll down to some really special characters. They're called wingdings, kind of a kooky name. Go ahead and select one, and you get these special symbols here. You can have a folder, you can have the OK sign with the hand, you can have a bell. Let's do a candle, that's fun. Click on Insert. There's the candle. Of course, you can't see it too well. Let me close out. Select the candle, click and drag, and let's increase the font of it by right-clicking on it to bring up the mini formatting toolbar. Let's go ahead and change it to 24, hit enter, and click off in a blank area. Okay, the candle's more visible now. If you want to insert an equation, it has a bunch of special characters that you probably recall from your days in algebra, fractions, or more advanced equations. To do that, just come up here, click on the Insert tab, just like inserting a symbol. Guess what? We're going over to the Symbols group, and then coming up here. You got two ways to do this. You can click on the Equations button, and it brings up its related Contextual Design tab here, and it says go ahead and type in an equation here. Just go ahead and start typing. We'll say B. I'm making this up as I go. B, and then I can come up here in the symbols group and say it equals. I can type in, any other letters or numbers, or better yet, I can insert some brackets, come up here to the structures group, and then click on the bracket drop-down arrow. Do I want any brackets? Let's go ahead and select the first one. And then if I'm like, okay, I like that bracket, but within the bracket, let me go ahead and select that square, that placeholder, and let's change the design of that by coming up here and clicking on the fraction drop-down arrow, and say you want to convert that into a stacked fraction. And then when you want to actually work with the placeholders, like come up here with that square, go ahead and select it, and then type in some sort of kooky equation. We'll say b minus the w of t, then come down here, is divided by, of course, I. Well, you know what you're doing if you can go ahead and work with the equations. I'm showing you where it's at here. And then you'll notice that when you're inside of it, it brings up the Design tab. Click on the outside, it disappears. Click within it, brings it back up. You also have the corresponding drop-down arrow to the right, the options for the equation. Click on it, and you've got Professional and Linear. When I select Professional, nothing changes, but when I click it and I go to Linear, it puts it in the order of operation. As you recall in algebra, that which you see which is in the first set of parentheses here must be done first. So b minus wt. After that's done, then it will divide it, the result of that, b minus wt, by I. And by default, when you insert an equation like that, it wants to, looks like put it in the center. You can come up here on the Home tab. Well, actually, it's in justification mode. Let's go ahead and click on the corresponding drop-down arrow and say, as far as justification, let's go ahead and align it to the left, and it puts it over there. In fact, if you want to go ahead and move it down, you can click and hit enter a couple of times, and that pushes it down. Or you can go ahead and click within it and grab the left tag there and click and drag it to move it up. As long as you have paragraph markers, you can move it from one line to the next. Come up here on the Home tab to the paragraph group, click on the Show Hide Codes. You can click it and drag it down to the next paragraph marker, the one at the very bottom here. Let me go ahead and turn the codes off. And then if I want to go ahead and save this equation here, click on the corresponding drop-down arrows, say you want to save it as a new equation. Brings up building blocks here that we'll cover in a later training video, but basically you can go ahead and give a name for your equation, call it, it's my spiffy equation. It's going to save it in the gallery of equations. So when I come back up here, click on the Insert tab and click on the equations, that drop-down arrow to the right, it'll be listed there. We haven't done it yet, but it'll be there. So it's spiffy EQ, we'll do too, so it sounds really fancy. And then click OK. And then let me go ahead and to delete this, you can click on the tag here, hit the delete key, gets rid of it. So let's say, okay, I want to use this equation again, but I can't remember how it was built. Well, we already saved it as an equation. So to insert that, come back up here, click on the Insert tab, go to the Symbols group. Instead of clicking on the equation button, click on its corresponding drop-down arrow. You got some built-in equations that you can go ahead and insert, the least of which is the one that we saved, and it was in the equation gallery. So let me go ahead and click and scroll down all the way to the bottom, and there it is, my spiffy EQ2. Go ahead and select it, inserts it, or like I said, you can use one of these other templates if you don't want to type in all this. Go ahead and click on it, inserts it, then you can go ahead and mess with it. Like instead of n equals 1, you can of course change it to t equals 1. Whatever works for you. Now, it doesn't actually calculate the equation. If you want to do calculations, you want to use Microsoft's Excel. It's just basically a bunch of non-working symbols here, for your eyes only, not to be used to calculate anything. Let me go ahead and select the, I call it the ear. You can call it a tag, just the left-hand side there, hit the delete key. Come back up here on the Insert tab, click on the equations drop-down arrow, scroll down to the bottom. I can go ahead and right-click on my equation and say, I want to go ahead and delete it. If I click on Organize and Delete, it brings it up here. And again, we'll cover this in a later training video. These are called building blocks, and basically they're items that you can go ahead and save, and it'll store it here. But I want to delete it, and you can see it selected right there. Go ahead and click Delete. Are you sure? Click Yes, close out, and it's no longer there. Equation drop-down arrow, nothing. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.